Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello. So excited to be here with you today on this December wintry day. Hope everyone is really getting into the holiday season. I know we have in my house. It's full on decorated inside and out, and it was like the most fun experience with my 8-month-old daughter. We had such a great time. But I am going live especially because this holiday season can be really challenging for many people's mental health. But also because that's exactly what we specialize in. Is I'm an integrative nutritionist. My name is Kimsey, and in my online health, nutrition, and wellness practice, Progressive Health and Wellness, we deliver a body-mind approach to help anxious, stressed out, burned out men and women um, optimize their physical and mental health. And so today, I'm going to talk about the connection between gut health and mental health. So I'm actually going to use one of our clients' stories to really drive this home. Her name is Lisa. I've talked about her before, but Lisa's story is very unique and really depicts the power of optimizing, of like really taking a root cause approach to mental health and a body-based, mind-based approach to mental health. So today I'm going to go through what are 5 different signs and symptoms that may reveal that digestive health is the real root cause to your anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, less than optimal mental health. Then I'll go through 3 different ways that gut health impacts mental health. And then, of course, 4 tips that you can start implementing right away to improve both the health of your digestive tract as well as your mind and mood. So it looks like we've got some people hopping on today. Thanks for being here. If you're here with me live, let me know that you're here with me live. Drop a comment. If you are watching the replay, let me know that you're watching the replay also. And some people wanted to be notified when I started going live. So let me let those people know too. Okay. All right, perfect. So the gut brain connection and the gut's connection to mental health has been getting a lot of attention in the last, I'll say 5 to 10 years. And rightfully so, right? Because there's such a strong impact that gut health can have on mental health. So before I really get into this, I want to share, I want to describe what the inflammation connection to mental health is. Really, it's like this inflammatory model when it comes to mental health. So, what this is really saying is that inflammation in the body, and especially in the gut, is a known root cause to chronic mental health issues, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, even schizophrenia, and beyond. And how this works is when the immune system, so to define inflammation, maybe that will help first. Inflammation is the body's immune system's response to injury or infection. And we know there's different types of injury. There's microbiome imbalances and food sensitivities and hormonal imbalances and emotional experiences and stresses and traumas and physical injury, traumatic brain injury. But all of these, if you think of the pool of injury, if you keep dumping water into a bucket, eventually it overflows. Same concept applies to inflammation in our brain and body. If you keep layering different types of injury on top of each other, on top of itself, then that is when symptoms and diagnosable conditions manifest. So, quite literally, the digestive tract, through imbalances in the gut microbiome, and I'll share more specifically in just a minute, 3 different ways that digestive health can impact mental health. But one of those ways is that the digestive tract can be one of our greatest sources of inflammation. So, when there's inflammation in the body, that literally biochemically translates to a production of what are called cytokines and chemokines, which are immune chemicals that the immune system uses to communicate with itself, as well as try to fight and destroy perceived antigens or pathogens. And those chemicals can cross our blood brain barrier. And when there's brain inflammation, what happens is it triggers what's called a microglia cell. And I should say the microglia cell is like it is the brain's immune system. So when these microglia cells are activated, they also release different types of pro-inflammatory chemicals that then they don't, once they're activated, they don't have a really great off switch. And these pro inflammatory chemicals can start to interfere with the functioning of our neurons. To give you an idea, there's a 10 microglia cell for every one nerve cell. So they significantly outnumber nerve cells. So you can see where if this inflammatory kind of tripwire is triggered and they start releasing these pro-inflammatory chemicals, that can affect neuronal firing, neuronal signaling, and cause in the frontal lobe and different areas of the brain what's called a spreading depression. And that translates into symptoms of anxiety or depression or other mental health imbalances. So I wanted to do kind of a brief overview of inflammation's connection to mental health, because that is at the core of how digestive health impacts our mental health. So here are 3 different ways that that can happen. One is microbiome imbalances. So the microbiome refers to the trillions of bacteria and fungi and viruses and even commensal parasites that live in our digestive tract. And you can think of these bacteria as coming in like different size camps, where we have the large camp probiotics, the bacteria that are really critical to many aspects of our health, from neurochemical production to immunity to hormone synthesis and balance and digestion and absorption, you name it. And then there's the smaller, like medium-sized camp bacteria that are, we have a live and let live contract with them. They're not bad. They're not an infection per se, meaning they're supposed to be there and they're normal. But when these bacteria, and I'm talking about bacteria like streptococcus or staphylococcus or different forms of E. coli or Klebsiella or Citrobacter, even Candida yeast, right? Candida yeast gets a lot of attention. But when they start to overgrow, then they become problematic. They produce, and this is the second way, kind of 1.5, if you will, of how digestive health impacts our mental health. But these imbalances promote inflammation. Our immune system sees it, knows that those are out of balance, and so it ramps up. Quite literally, we'll see elevated levels of secretory IgA or different types of immune cells in the gut. So it triggers our inflammatory response. And these bacteria also produce pro-inflammatory substances, postbiotics, and what are called lipopolysaccharides. So postbiotics, you can think of postbiotics as like what bacteria poop out. So they eat food that we eat, and then they poop out certain chemicals. And then lipopolysaccharides are components of gram-negative cell membranes. And these lipopolysaccharides and certain types of postbiotics, when they cross the gut barrier, they can cross the blood-brain barrier, get into the brain, trigger those microglia cells. And now we've got that spreading depression that then impacts neuronal signaling and our mental health. So gut microbiome imbalances and the impact that has on inflammation and the production of their postbiotics are one really big way that digestive health has an impact on our mental health. Another way is our microbiome can actually produce virtually all of the same neurochemicals that our brain and nervous system does. 95% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. The gut microbiome can produce acetylcholine, it can produce dopamine, it can produce GABA, norepinephrine, endorphins. So, if there's an imbalance in the microbiome, there can be a balance in our neurochemistry as a result. So, that's another really big way. So, we've got pro inflammation, we have imbalances in our neurochemistry. And then I'll also say the third way is leaky gut gets a lot of attention. Maybe not everyone has heard of what's called leaky brain. So the gut barrier and the brain barrier are nearly identical. And the gut barrier, as many of you probably know, is supposed to be like a fortress. It's the barrier system is part of our immune system. So it's a physical barrier to keep everything and the contents of the lumen in the intestines, and only that which is absorbed can pass through the gut barrier into the rest of the body. The brain is very similar. The blood-brain barrier is a very dense capillary network that only lets either allowed particles or very small particles to cross through into the brain. And if there's a degradation in the gut barrier, that leads to chronic inflammation in the rest of the body. And that chronic inflammation degrades the integrity of the blood-brain barrier and now allows larger substances that wouldn't normally be able to pass through to pass through. And again, the microglia cells see that, hyperreactive, and now we have that brain inflammation. So imbalances in the microbiome, imbalances in our neurochemistry from the imbalances in the microbiome, and a compromised gut lining are three ways that our gut health can contribute to our mental health. And that's not even getting into maldigestion, malabsorption, the impact that that has on nutrient deficiencies. So that really leads me into Lisa's story. So Lisa had come in, this was years ago, actually. She came in for anxiety. Actually, the two biggest things, her two biggest challenges were gut health and mental health. So anxiety she had since like high school, and she's in her mid 30s now. Anxiety she had since high school, it had gotten progressively worse and turned into social and health anxiety. So she really didn't like large social settings or being around large groups of people. So like going to the grocery store, for example, was challenging. Parties would have been challenging. But she also had health anxiety where she'd struggled with her digestion and different aspects of her health for so long. She was getting anxiety, was having anxiety about, is it something more serious, right? Why can't anybody figure out what's going on? Does that mean that something serious is flying beneath the radar? And so her health triggered a lot of anxiety too. Digestively, she had all the classic symptoms of, we'll just say IBS, right? That big catch-all diagnosis that really means we can't find any overt problems, but we know that you have digestive symptoms. It's not really a real diagnosis. So she had gas and bloating, acid reflux, had been taking omeprazole for years, which, by the way, will aggravate nutrient deficiencies, especially B vitamins and major minerals like calcium and magnesium and potassium, zinc. So she'd been taking omeprazole for years, gas and bloating, like I said, and constipation was her biggest issue. She didn't really have diarrhea, but she would go sometimes a couple days a week without having a bowel movement. So fast forward with Lisa, we started an anti-inflammatory diet. At first, we pulled her off of the main culprits, kind of a paleo-Mediterranean approach. So we pulled her off of gluten and dairy, soy, corn, and sugar. We emphasized protein, kind of a lower carb diet. And then we ended up running a stool test and a SIBO breath test. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And her stool test honestly was pretty unremarkable. There really weren't that many overt imbalances in her microbiome. Her digestive enzyme output could have been better. And her secretory IgA was low, which indicates more of a chronic ongoing issue. But other than that, she didn't have any yeast, no parasites, no infection, nothing really stood out. But the SIBO test, on the other hand, was positive for both hydrogen and methane producing bacteria. So we pivoted our diet. We did a trial of low FODMAP. Honestly, low FODMAP is hit or miss when I see both hydrogen and methane dominance. When it's just hydrogen, I see a lot of success with low FODMAP. When it's both or just methane, it's not as reliable. And that was her story. She didn't really see any changes with low FODMAP. So after 3 weeks, we introduced the FODMAPs back in. We ended up testing food sensitivities. And through those changes, she did see make progress. Really and truly, that with some of the baseline supplements like magnesium glycinate being really big, restoring her vitamin D levels, her mineral levels, B vitamins, her anxiety lifted within like 30, 45 days. She was feeling much more stable mentally. And then we continued to implement an evidence-based protocol for the SIBO overgrowth. So we had to do a couple of rounds of antimicrobials. We used different types of antimicrobials because bacteria can start to form resistances to certain herbs if they're used repeatedly. And we were successful in eventually getting her breath test down into normal ranges and having daily bowel movements. The bloating was relieved, and then had her work with her doctor about the omeprazole prescription. So the whole process took about 6 months, but her anxiety lifted, like I said, in 30 to 45 days. And then I'm not going to paint a blue sky here. I'm not going to say that she only saw results. Like, we had hiccups, right? We had circumstances come up where, she was like, oh my gosh, there's a flare in my symptoms temporarily. So we would pivot and change something or slow down the antimicrobials or look over her food journal, see what she's eating, what are her stress levels like. So we had things like that come up along the way. And I want to be realistic about what the process looks like. But the process overall over those 6 months, as she was feeling better and better, her symptoms were less and less severe. They were less frequent until we got to the point where she was feeling really good most of the time. And if she didn't, she knew exactly why and what she needed to do. And that's exactly our definition of health. You feel really good. Your energy, your mood, your digestion, your sleep, your clarity, cognition, everything feels really good most of the time. And then when life happens, which it inevitably will, we go to a party, we drink too much, we get super stressed out at work about something, right? When life inevitably happens and your symptoms, some come back, they're not as severe. You recognize them really early on, and you know exactly what to do to get yourself back on track. So with that in mind, here are 4 different things. Actually, I didn't even go through some of the signs and symptoms that your digestive tract might be the real root cause to your anxiety or mental health challenges. 1, acid reflux. Acid reflux is an easy one to trivialize. It's so common. People just take Tums. It's no big deal. But if you notice acid reflux more than once a quarter from like drinking too much or something, then we need to look at it. If acid reflux is happening a few times a week or even weekly, we need to look at it and figure out where that's coming from. Is it H. pylori? Is it food reactions? Is it SIBO, right? What's really driving it? So acid reflux. Number 2, gas and bloating, especially like trapped distension style bloating where you feel pregnant, or if your gas is clearing a room, it's not normal. That's another one that society has normalized. We kind of laugh at it. We razz the person that it's happening to, but it's not normal. Number 3, here's a big one. Does your anxiety worsen when you have digestive symptoms? So this is one most people, when this happens, and I hear this not uncommonly, when this happens, most people think it's their anxiety driving their digestive symptoms, right? And if it's something acute, if you're going to give a presentation and you're really nervous about it and you start having loose stools, different, right? That's a different scenario. And then it goes away when the presentation's over. That's a different scenario. But if you're feeling anxious and then suddenly randomly for no reason have diarrhea, that it could really be the other way around. Whatever was triggering the diarrhea, if it's food, if it's stress, if it's SIBO, microbiome imbalances, that can manifest as anxiety, but it's the root is the digestive tract. Another one that goes hand in hand with that is if you feel butterflies often, like that feeling of butterflies, nervous stomach, that could be another sign. Okay. And then let's see, I wrote them down. If you have diarrhea or constipation or both, an alteration of both, that would be another sign. So really chronic digestive symptoms could be and are a very, very big and common root cause to mental health challenges. Okay, so 4 things that you can do to optimize your digestion and mental health. One would be try an elimination diet. Now, this is vague. What I mean by that is there's several different kinds of elimination diets that you could try and maybe more effective depending on your uniqueness, right? And what's at the root of your issues. So, for example, sometimes we use a paleo style diet. Sometimes we use low histamine. Sometimes we use low FODMAP. So again, it really depends, but I would say most often I start with that paleo style diet. So if you want to orient yourself to more of a paleo approach or like Whole30, those would be great starting points because they really emphasize whole foods, minimally processed, quality, low glycemic, and they pull out some of those major triggers like gluten and dairy and sugar. So one would be try an elimination diet. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, cut the foods out completely, and then systematically reintroduce and see how they affect how you feel. Number 2 would be very present when eating a meal. So when I ask people, where do you think digestion starts? Most people say the mouth. Some people say the stomach. The reality is digestion starts in the brain, just from anticipating, eating, smelling the food as it's being cooked, being hungry. It's called the cephalic phase of digestion, which means if we're not present with the meal, if we're like eating while driving, we're not even hungry, we're eating for convenience, we're eating while working, then we're automatically operating at 80%. So be present with each meal or snack. Sit down, feet flat on the ground, smell the food, take 3 deep, slow breaths as you smell the food until you start to salivate. And that's when you know that your digestive tract is primed and ready for food. Hydrochloric acid's being released, saliva is being released, digestive juices are being released. That's when you know. Number 3 is consider digestive support. So some easy things that you could do would be drinking apple cider vinegar, like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar mixed in like a shot of water. You can try bitter herbs. So there are certain herbal tinctures that are bitter. So like dandelion or orange or lemon, that bitter taste stimulates the release of saliva. There are lots of different kinds of digestive enzyme supplements that you could try. I know, I think it's Enzymatica. Digest Gold is a good over-the-counter one. I love Digeszyme by Designs for Health. And then I would start with those things and then the presents to help optimize digestion. There are probiotic recommendations in the whole 9 yards, but probiotics really get unique depending on what's going on. So like certain types of probiotics, for example, would be contraindicated if SIBO is happening. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to give probiotic recommendations, but some probiotics could be helpful. And then number 4 is consider lab testing. If you've been there, done that, if you've tried all these things, the idea of an elimination diet without any specific guidance sounds intimidating. If you just want to get to the real root cause and start a personalized plan to take back your physical and mental health, lab testing is the fastest way to do that. So food sensitivity testing, SIBO breath testing, stool testing. I mean, beyond that, we have a full comprehensive blood panel that is mental health focused. That is huge for helping us really get to the bottom and find specific patterns that may be involved. Hormone testing can be really helpful. Hair mineral analysis can be really helpful. So there's lots of different tests available, and not everybody needs every test. Obviously, that's something that would be figured out upon like meeting and knowing your story more. But lab testing is how we're able to figure out what's really going on and develop a plan based on you specifically. As I say, don't just guess, test. And then we can methodically walk you through the process designed to get back your physical and mental health. All right, we have a question. Somebody's asking, what do you suggest for people with MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome? As far as stimulating digestion, I also have gastroparesis and chronic pancreatitis. Yeah, I have to avoid apple cider vinegar. Right. Yeah. So in that case, with all of those considerations, you might want to think about, so a digestive enzyme, like pancreatic enzyme blend, may be helpful. Now, I got to put this out there. This is not me recommending this for you specifically. I know I'm a nutritionist. I'm not your nutritionist. So don't mistake this as medical advice. These are just things that you might consider if you haven't already looked into them. But they make pancreatic enzyme blends. So maybe consider that or talk to your doctor about that. And then honestly, even just presence with the meal can be really helpful. So what I mean by that is we can voluntarily make ourselves salivate. If you think about sucking on a lemon and draw your attention to your salivary glands, you can make yourself salivate. That implies that you're in a parasympathetic state and that your digestive tract is primed and ready for food. It's a small thing, but that could also be really, really helpful. Last thing that's coming to mind also is prokinetic support. So prokinetics are things that help with motility, gastrointestinal motility. Pure Encapsulations makes a product called Modal Pro. Honestly, magnesium citrate or glycinate can be really helpful prokinetics. Those might be something to consider too. And my last recommendation would be to limit drinking fluids during a meal. So don't like chug a big glass of water and then eat, or eating and drink a bunch of water because it will dilute the hydrochloric acid. You can take sips of water throughout the meal, obviously, but don't drink large volumes of liquid during the meal. Okay. I think that covers it. Did that help? Let me know if that helped. If anybody else has any questions that are watching right now, or if you are watching the replay and have questions, comment below. I will always be tagged, notified, and happy to answer. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. Hope this helped. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.